All right, guys, welcome to Bria Technical Academy. Today we're going to be going over the record set destination. I'm going to show you how to use it and what its purpose is. Basically, the record set destination, if you need to temporarily store in the memory a column or a row or any type of subset or the whole table, you could store it in the object variable generated through the record set destination and use it in another task or the same task, how which whatever you, it depends on what you're doing. So let's start off with the data flow, and also you need to create the object that's going to store the value. So let's just call this variable id, and it's going to be of the object data type because we're storing a column. Let's grab our source. Okay, our source is going to be a table within the AdventureWorks 2012 database. And I'm just going to show you quickly the contents of the table. It's going to be dbo.staff. And let's preview the table. As you can see, it has ID column, last name, email, gender, department, start date, salary, job title, and region ID. These are the columns. We're just going to grab one column, ID. We're going to grab a subset of this table. All right, so let's go to columns, and we just want the ID. So we just deselected everything and selected ID. All right, now we're going to grab our record set destination. And if you're not too sure what any of these components are, you can just click on them and read down here. It tells you what it does. So basically, we're going to store the ID column in our record set. Okay, let's grab the variable. And the one we created should be down at the bottom, ID. And let's grab the input column, which was ID from our source. All right, let's go back. And everything's good. All right, now let's go back into our control flow. And what we're going to do, we're not really going to drop our the result of what we're doing into an actual destination. So we're just going to use our multicast as somewhat of a stimulation. Let's simulation. I'm sorry. Let's grab our for each loop container. What we're going to do is we're going to use the the ID column that we saved in our object, and we're gonna execute for each iteration. So for each row of the ID column, and we're going to do this by going into the for each loop container, and we're going through an object. So we always select for each ADO enumerator for an object. So it's going to be rows in the first table. It's only one table, and we want to map our variable over to, let's create a new one. We're going to call this one ID with the S, IDs. So the one with the S is the one for our for each loop container. And it's, oh, I think I made a mistake. Let's see. I think I selected string when I mapped it over. It should be, yeah, it should be integer since it's numbers IDs. Okay, we want integer because the column values are integers. Sorry. Okay, so integers, we mapped it over to the IDs variable, and it's of an integer data type. All right, now let's grab another data flow task. Let's go inside the data flow task. Okay, so we just want to execute a command from a source. So let's go to OLADB source, click. All right, we already are connected to our connection manager. So we just want to execute a command, and we want it to be for each row of that column that we selected, which is ID. So we want to run it for each row. That is the reason why we selected to place it in the for each loop container. So we're just gonna select. It's gonna be the same table, but this time we're bringing back all the columns. So select all from, I think it was DBO dot staff where ID equals question mark. And the question mark is basically going to be our parameter. We want each of those rows to fulfill the parameter. So we're going to do this by going to parameters and selecting the variable that we mapped over, which is user IDs with the lowercase d. And what that's going to do, parameter 0. So we only have one parameter, so it's going to be parameter 0. If we had multiple, we would select parameter 0, parameter 1, parameter 2, parameter 3, and a in the order that we would want to execute them. So we only have one parameter, which is the column ID, and it's going to run for each value in that column. So click OK. All right. Okay. And like I said, we're not depositing rows into any destination. We just want to see our work. But once you know how these components and tasks work, you could figure out how to use them in other ways. But the main point is to understand how they work. So we're going to click on our data flow and enable data viewer. And let's run this. All right, there was an error. Let's see what the error is. Number specified errors variable cannot be found. Let's see. Let's stop debugging. All right, let's go into our control flow. All right, let's just delete this altogether. All right, delete. Okay, this is integer. Oh, let's see. All right, let's go in collection, ADO enumerator. Okay, I see what the problem is. We forgot to select the variable that we created in the record set destination. Let's make sure we mapped it over. I think we did. It's just when I went back to correct the data type of the mapping, it threw everything out of whack. So let's just make sure we do this again. And this is the one we created of integer data type. Okay, so it's good now. Data flow, and everything should be good. Let's make sure we selected the right parameter. IDs. Okay. All right. Let's start it again. Okay, as you can see, for each iteration or row, it's given us the full. It's given us all the columns. So for one, we already saw two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. And just to go over what we did, in case I lost any of you, let's stop. As you can see, it's for each iteration or each row in the ID column, it's executing. And let me stop it and explain, give a brief recapitulation of what we did. We basically grabbed a subset of rows or a single column of a table, which was IDs from the dbo.staff table. We grabbed that ID column. We stored it in an object variable created through the record set destination. This is our variable, and we created the variable before we um, we went into record set destination, because record set destination won't allow you to create new variable. So we created it and we selected it here. It was an object uh, data type, and once we selected the variable that's gonna hold our column, we selected the column. Then we went into the control flow. We connected the data flow task from our source to the for each loop container. And in the for each loop container, we selected the ADO enumerator because we're going through an object. And the object variable is user ID, which we created in the record set destination. And we mapped that over to user IDs. We created it here. We just click down. Sorry, we click down and we click create new variable, and we made sure it was of an integer data type because that column ID was integer in terms of its data type. And once we did that, we inserted data flow. I mean a data flow task into our for each loop container, and we're just looking to execute a query. We weren't really depositing anything into the destination. We just wanted to see how the record set functions. So we wrote out a command and we used a parameter, and we mapped the parameter to our variable, which was the IDs created in the for each loop. So what this will do is it'll allow us for each value in that column, it'll execute. So select all from dbo.staff where ID equals 1, where ID equals 2, where ID equals 3, where ID equals 4, where ID equals 5. And that's what you were seeing in um, the data viewer. And that's basically how the record set destination functions. Thank you for attending this tutorial. Have a nice day.